The stars stretched endlessly outside the windows of the USS Odyssey, their cold light casting faint shadows on the walls of the ship. It was quiet, almost too quiet, as Captain Laura Hayes stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. She had always found comfort in silence during long missions, but tonight felt different. There was a strange tension in the air, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Ryan Carter, the communications officer, sat at his station, scanning frequencies for anything unusual. He wasn't expecting much. This part of space was supposed to be empty, but something about the stillness made him uneasy. His fingers moved over the controls, adjusting dials and fine-tuning the sensors. Then, just as he was about to give up for the night, faint sound came through the speakers. At first it was barely audible, like static mixed with wind. But as Ryan leaned closer, squinting at the monitor, he realized it wasn't random noise. It was a voice, or at least, it sounded like one. The words were garbled, impossible to understand. But there was no mistaking the emotion behind them. Pain, fear, desperation. It sent chills down Ryan's spine. "Captain," Ryan called out, his voice cutting through the silence. "You need to hear this." Laura turned immediately, her sharp eyes locking onto Ryan's face. "What is it?" "I'm picking up a transmission," Ryan said, adjusting the volume so everyone on the bridge could hear. "It's weak, but I think it's coming from nearby." The crew paused what they were doing, listening intently. The sound was haunting, a mix of sobs and broken phrases, none of which made sense. But even without understanding the language, the message was clear. Someone or something was in trouble. Laura didn't hesitate. "Can you pinpoint the source?" Ryan nodded, his fingers flying across the console. A few moments later, a blinking dot appeared on the navigation screen. "It's not far," he said. "About an hour's travel at our current speed." "Set a course," Laura ordered. "Let's see what we're dealing with." As the engines hummed to life and the ship changed direction, the mood on the bridge shifted. Curiosity mingled with apprehension. They had been sent into deep space to explore, but encounters like this weren't common. Whatever's or whoever they were heading toward, it was bound to be unexpected. An hour passed quickly, the crew working quietly as the ship closed in on the signal's origin. When they finally arrived, what they saw left them speechless. Floating silently in the vast emptiness of space was a small escape pod, its surface scarred and battered. It looked ancient, as if it had been drifting for years. Dr. Emily Grant, the science officer, studied the readings carefully. "Life signs are faint," she reported, her brow furrowing. "But there's definitely something or someone inside." Laura gave the order to bring the pod aboard using the ship's tractor beam. As it was secured in the cargo bay, the crew gathered around, their faces a mix of excitement and concern. No one knew what to expect. This was uncharted territory, literally and figuratively. Ryan stepped forward, his heart pounding as the hatch of the pod slowly opened. At first, all they could see was darkness. Then a small figure emerged, trembling and weak. It was unlike anything any of them had ever seen before. The creature, if that was the right word, was humanoid, with smooth, pale skin that seemed to shimmer under the lights. Its large, luminous eyes dominated its face, filled with tears that sparkled like liquid diamonds. Thin limbs poked out from beneath tattered fabric, and its breathing was shallow, labored. For a moment, no one moved. The alien child, because that's what it was, a child, looked up at them, its gaze darting nervously between the humans surrounding it. Then, with a soft whimper, it collapsed. Ryan reacted instinctively, rushing forward to catch the frail being before it hit the floor. Up close, he could feel how fragile it was, like holding a bird with broken wings. The child clung to him tightly, burying its face against his chest. Though it didn't speak, its body language conveyed everything: fear, exhaustion, and a desperate need for safety. "It's okay," Ryan murmured softly, unsure if the words meant anything to the child. "You're safe now." Laura approached cautiously, her expression softening as she watched the scene unfold. "Take it to the medical bay," she instructed. "We'll figure out what to do next." In the medical bay, Dr. Grant worked quickly to stabilize the child. Chiran scans, checked vitals, and administered fluids, all while trying to make sense of the alien's physiology. It was unlike anything she'd encountered before, both fascinating and baffling. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew gathered in the mess hall to discuss what had happened. Opinions varied widely. Some, like navigator Samantha Brooks, were wary. "We don't know anything about it," she argued. "What if it's dangerous?" Others, like mechanic Jake Miller, disagreed. "It's just a kid," he said firmly. "Look at it scared. We can't turn our backs on it." Laura listened to both sides, weighing their arguments carefully. She understood Samantha's concerns. Venturing into the unknown always carried risks. But she also saw the truth in Jake's words. This wasn't just about protocol or caution, it was about humanity. What kind of people would they be if they abandoned a frightened child? "We'll keep it on board for now," Laura decided. "But we proceed with caution. Dr. Grant will continue studying it, and we'll try to communicate. Till we know more, let's focus on keeping it safe." Over the next few days, the alien child became a central presence on the ship. Dr. Grant named it Lyra, a temporary label until they could learn more. Lyra was curious, despite its fear, often watching the crew members with wide-eyed fascination. It seemed especially drawn to Jake, who spent hours tinkering with machinery in the engineering bay. Jake, normally reserved and introverted, found himself warming to Lyra. He showed her tools, explaining their uses in simple terms. Though she didn't understand the words, she mimicked his actions, giggling when she accidentally dropped a wrench or hit the wrong button. For the first time in years, Jake felt a sense of connection, as if Lyra had reminded him of the joy in simple things. One evening, as Jake played a tune on his harmonica, Lyra tilted her head, listening intently. After a moment, she began humming along, her voice soft and melodic. The sound was beautiful, otherworldly, yet strangely familiar. It was a reminder that, despite their differences, they shared something universal: music. As the days went on, the crew grew more comfortable around Lyra. They taught her basic gestures and phrases, marveling at how quickly she learned. Slowly, but surely, the lines between human and alien began to blur. Lyra wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was part of the family. But questions lingered. Where had Lyra come from? Why had she been alone in that escape pod? What dangers might still be lurking in the depths of space? Now those answers remained elusive. All they could do was protect Lyra and hope that in time, the truth would reveal itself. Days turned into a week, and Lyra became more comfortable aboard the USS Odyssey. The crew, once unsure of how to interact with the alien child, found themselves growing attached. Dr. Emily Grant continued her work in the medical bay, studying Lyra's biology and trying to decipher her language. But progress was slow. Every time Emily thought she was close to understanding something, another mystery would arise. Lyra's body seemed to function differently from anything human. Her metabolism burned energy at an astonishing rate, and her brain activity showed patterns that defied explanation. Despite these challenges, communication began to improve. Ryan Carter, the communications officer, spent hours each day recording Lyra's vocalizations and comparing them to Earth languages. He noticed that certain sounds repeated themselves when Lyra pointed at objects or mimicked actions. Using this as a starting point, he created a rudimentary vocabulary: food, water, sleep, and even thank you. Though Lyra's attempts to pronounce these words were clumsy, her enthusiasm made everyone smile. Jake Miller, the ship's mechanic, played a key role in bridging the gap between species. Like the others, Jake didn't rely on words. Instead, he used gestures, facial expressions, and shared activities to connect with Lyra. In the engineering bay, he introduced her to simple tools and let her try her hand at fixing things. At first she struggled, dropping screws and misplacing parts. But Jake never lost patience. He cheered her on, clapping whenever she succeeded, no matter how small the achievement. One evening, as Jake worked on repairing a broken panel, Lyra sat cross-legged beside him, watching intently. She reached out hesitantly, pointing to the wrench in his hand. Jake handed it to her, showing her how to tighten a bolt. Her face lit up with pride when the task was done, and she handed the tool back with a grin. It was a small moment, but it meant the world to Jake. For the first time in years, he felt like he was making a difference, not just fixing machines. But building trust, music became another powerful way for Jake and Lyra to bond. Jake had always carried his harmonica with him, playing tunes during quiet moments in the engineering bay. One day, as he played a soft melody, Lyra tilted her head, listening closely. When the song ended, she reached out, touching the instrument gently. Jake handed it to her, guiding her fingers over the holes. Together, they created a shaky but beautiful tune. Lyra laughed, delighted by the sound. And Jake couldn't help but laugh too. The rest of the crew noticed the change in Jake. Samantha. Brooks, the navigator, teased him about being a softie, but there was warmth in her voice. Even Laura Hayes, the captain, smiled when she saw Jake teaching Lyra new songs. It was a reminder that despite their differences, humans and aliens could find common ground. But not everyone shared this optimism. Tensions began to rise among the crew as questions about Lyra's origins remained unanswered. Samantha voiced her concerns during one of the daily meetings. "You don't know where she came from," she said, pacing back and forth. "What if her people are looking for her? What if they're hostile?" Laura listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. "I understand your worries," she replied. "But we can't ignore the fact that Lyra is alone and vulnerable. If we abandon her now, what does that say about us?" Dr. Grant chimed in, holding up a data tablet. "From what I've gathered, Lyra's species is highly advanced. Their technology far surpasses ours. But there's evidence of conflict scars on her body suggest injuries caused by weapons, not accidents." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. War. That word hung heavy in the air, unspoken yet undeniable. Lyra wasn't just a lost child. She was a refugee, fleeing something unimaginable. Jake spoke up, his voice firm. "That doesn't change the fact that she needs our help. Can't turn her away because we're scared." Laura nodded, agreeing with Jake. "For now, we stay the course. Dr. Grant, keep working on decoding her memories. Maybe we'll find clues about her home planet or why she was sent away. Until then, we focus on keeping her safe." As the days passed, Lyra's presence began to affect the crew in unexpected ways. Meals in the mess hall became livelier, with Lyra joining in, mimicking the crew's laughter and conversations. Even those who had been hesitant at first, like Samantha, softened around her. She started teaching Lyra basic games like tossing a ball back and forth and was surprised by how quickly the child caught on. Lyra also had a knack for curiosity. She explored every corner of the ship, peeking into rooms and examining equipment. Sometimes her antics caused minor chaos, a misplaced tool here, a spilled drink there, but no one minded. Her innocence brought a sense of lightness to the otherwise sterile environment. One afternoon, while walking through the observation deck, Laura found Lyra standing by the large window, gazing at the stars. The child's eyes shimmered with wonder as she pointed to the endless expanse outside. Laura knelt beside her, following her gaze. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said softly. Lyra turned to look at her, tilting her head as if trying to understand. Then, slowly, she placed a hand against the glass, tracing the outline of a distant star. Laura smiled, placing her own hand next to Lyra's, though they couldn't speak the same language. The moment felt profound, a connection forged without words. Despite the growing bond between Lyra and the crew, uncertainty loomed. Dr. Grant's research revealed fragments of memories buried deep within Lyra's mind. Images of destruction flashed across the screens and the medical bay cities reduced to rubble, skies choked with smoke, and flashes of blinding light. Lyra whimpered in her sleep, clutching at invisible wounds. It was clear that whatever had happened to her people, it had been catastrophic. Emily approached Laura with the findings, her face grim. "It looks like her planet was devastated by war," she explained. "These memories, they're traumatic. I think her parents sent her away to protect her." Laura sighed, rubbing her temples. "So she's not just a runaway. She's a survivor." "Yes," Emily confirmed. "And if we're right, whoever attacked her, people might still be looking for her." The weight of responsibility settled heavily on Laura's shoulders. Protecting Lyra was no longer just about compassionate. It was about keeping her safe from potential threats. But how could they defend her against enemies they didn't even know existed? Jake overheard part of the conversation and stepped forward, determination etched on his face. "We won't let anything happen to her," he said firmly. "She trusts us. We have to honor that." Laura met his gaze, seeing the resolve in his eyes. "Agreed. For now, we keep moving forward. Let's hope we find answers before anyone finds us." That night, as the ship drifted through the vast emptiness of space, Lyra lay curled up in a makeshift bed in the medical bay. Jake sat nearby, watching over her. He pulled out his harmonica and began to play a gentle lullaby. Lyra's breathing slowed, her eyelids drooping as the soothing melody filled the room. For a brief moment, all seemed peaceful. But beyond the stars, danger lurked, waiting to disrupt the fragile harmony aboard the USS Odyssey. The days aboard the USS Odyssey continued in a rhythm of exploration and discovery. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Dr. Emily Grant worked tirelessly to uncover more about Lyra's past, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she analyzed data from neural scans. The fragments of memory she had uncovered were troubling images of destruction, screams echoing through smoke-filled skies, and flashes of light that could only be weapons. It was clear that Lyra's home planet had been devastated by war, but the why and how remained elusive. One evening, after hours of sifting through the data, Emily stumbled upon something new. Hidden within the chaotic memories was a recurring symbol, a jagged triangle surrounded by circles. At first, it seemed random, just another piece of alien imagery. But when Emily cross-referenced it with the ship's database, she found a match. The symbol belonged to an ancient civilization known for its advanced technology and ruthless expansion. These people, long thought extinct, had once ruled vast regions of space before collapsing under the weight of their own greed and violence. Emily's heart raced as she pieced together the implications. If this symbol represented Lyra's people lure their enemies, it meant they were dealing with far more than a simple refugee. She rushed to Laura Hayes' quarters to share her findings. Laura listened intently as Emily explained the significance of the symbol. "So you're saying Lyra's species might have been part of this empire?" she asked, leaning forward in her chair. "Or they fought against it," Emily replied. "The memories are fragmented, but there's evidence of resistance. I think Lyra's parents were on the losing side." Laura frowned, the weight of the revelation settling heavily on her shoulders. "If that's true, then whoever attacked them might still be out there. And if they find us with Lyra, they'll stop at nothing to get her back," Emily finished grimly. Meanwhile, Jake Miller spent most of his time with Lyra, teaching her new words and showing her how things worked around the ship. He noticed subtle changes in her behavior, moments of hesitation when certain topics came up, or a flicker of fear in her eyes when loud noises startled her. One day, while playing a game of catch, Lyra suddenly froze, staring at the floor as if seeing something no one else could. Jake knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "What is it, Lyra?" he asked softly. Though she couldn't fully understand him, his tone conveyed concern. Lyra looked up, her large eyes glistening with unshed tears. Slowly, she reached out and traced shapes in the air, shapes that matched the symbol Emily had discovered. Jake didn't recognize it, but he could tell it meant something important to her. He nodded encouragingly, letting her know it was okay to express herself. Later, Jake shared what he'd seen with Laura and Emily. "She knows something," he said firmly. "We need to figure out what it is," Laura agreed, calling a meeting. With the senior crew members, they decided to try a new approach, using visual aids to trigger Lyra's memories. Emily prepared holographic projections of the symbol and other images related to the ancient civilization, hoping to jog Lyra's recollection. When they showed the holograms to Lyra, her reaction was immediate. She recoiled at first, trembling visibly, but then her expression hardened. She began pointing at the symbols, making sharp gestures, and emitting sounds that resembled commands. It was as if she was trying to explain something urgent. Dr. Grant recorded everything, analyzing Lyra's vocal patterns and body language. Over time, a clearer picture emerged. Lyra's parents hadn't just fled the war, they had been part of a rebellion fighting against their oppressors. When the tide turned against them, they sent Lyra away to save her life. But they also entrusted her with something valuable, something worth dying for. What do you think it is? Ryan Carter asked during one of the debriefings. A weapon? A map? Some kind of secret? We won't know until we can communicate better, Emily admitted. But whatever it is, it's dangerous enough that her people risked everything to protect her. As the crew grappled with these revelations, tensions aboard the ship grew. Samantha Brooks voiced her concerns more frequently, urging Laura to consider alternative courses of action. We're putting ourselves in harm's way, she argued. What if we drop her off at the nearest habitable planet and let someone else deal with this? Jake shot her a glare and abandoned her. After everything she's been through, it's not about abandoning her, Samantha countered. It's about survival. We don't even know what we're up against. Laura held up a hand, silencing the argument before it escalated. I understand both sides, she said calmly. But we made a promise to each other and to Lyra. We protect her no matter what. Her words carried weight, and though the debate continued, the decision stood. They would stay the course. In the midst of the uncertainty, moments of joy reminded the crew why they had taken Lyra in. She began learning more English phrases, delighting in repeating them back to the crew. Her laughter echoed through the halls, brightening even the darkest corners of the ship. Jake taught her how to draw, giving her colored pencils and paper to express herself. Sketches were abstract, filled with swirling lines and bursts of color. But they revealed glimpses of her inner world, her fears, her hopes, her dreams. One evening, as the crew gathered in the mess hall for dinner, Lyra surprised everyone by standing up and speaking haltingly in broken English. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For help. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Then, slowly, applause broke out. Smiles spread across faces, and Lyra beamed with pride. For the first time since arriving on the Odyssey, she felt truly accepted. But peace was fleeting. Late one night, as the ship drifted through the void, alarms blared throughout the corridors. Ryan Carter bolted upright in his seat, scanning the monitors frantically. Captain, he shouted. Multiple ships approaching fast. Laura rushed to the bridge, her mind racing. On the view screen, several sleek vessels appeared, their designs unmistakably alien. They bore markings similar to those on Lyra's escape pod, confirming everyone's worst fears. They're hailing us, Ryan reported, his voice tight with tension. Put them through, Laura ordered, steeling herself for what was to come. A harsh, guttural voice crackled over the comms. You harbor the fugitive. Surrender her immediately, or face the consequences. Laura exchanged a glance with Jake, who stood nearby, his jaw clenched. No, she said firmly. We won't hand her over without knowing your intentions. The response was immediate, a barrage of warning shots fired past the Odyssey, narrowly missing its hull. Laura gave the order to raise shields and prepare for evasive maneuvers. As the ship lurched into motion, dodging blasts, the reality of their situation hit hard. They were no longer explorers charting the stars. They were protectors, fighting to keep a frightened child safe from forces far greater than themselves. And as the enemy ships closed in, one thing became painfully clear: the hardest battles were yet to come. The shuttle docked with a dull thud as Jake, Samantha, and the others returned to the USS Odyssey. The boarding mission had been successful at least in terms of gathering intelligence, but it came at a cost. One of the security officers had sustained a minor injury during the firefight, and everyone was visibly shaken. Still, they carried something far more valuable than any physical treasure: the truth about Lyra's pursuers. Laura Hayes stood waiting in the docking bay, her face tense but resolute. As Jake stepped off the shuttle, holding the portable drive tightly in his hand, she wasted no time. What did you find? She asked, her voice low and urgent. Jake handed her the drive without a word. His expression said enough. Laura turned to Dr. Emily Grant, who was already setting up a workstation nearby. Get this decrypted immediately, Laura ordered. We need answers fast. Emily nodded, inserting the drive into her console. Within moments, lines of alien text began scrolling across the screen. The data was complex, written in a language none of them could read, but Emily had tools designed for exactly this kind of challenge. With Ryan Carter's help, she started translating fragment by fragment, piecing together the horrifying picture hidden within. As the hours passed, the full scope of the enemy's plans became clear. They weren't just remnants of an ancient empire, they were its architects, rebuilding what had once been lost. Their goal was simple, yet devastating: domination. Using advanced bioweapons and experimental technologies, they sought to subjugate entire civilizations, forcing them into servitude or wiping them out entirely. But there was one detail that stood out above all else. Lyra wasn't just a survivor of their war. She was central to their plans. Her parents, brilliant scientists who had defied the Empire, had developed a genetic key capable of unlocking unimaginable power. That key now resided within Lyra herself, encoded in her DNA. They want her because of what she carries inside. Her, Emily explained, pointing to a diagram on the screen. It's like a coded blueprint for creating weapons unlike anything we've ever seen. Laura's jaw tightened as she processed the information. So if they get their hands on her, they'll use her to finish what they started. Yes, Emily confirmed grimly. And based on these files, they're not above torturing her to extract the information. Jake clenched his fists, anger boiling beneath the surface. Lyra had already suffered so much losing her family, fleeing her home, enduring fear and uncertainty. The thought of her being subjected to such cruelty was unbearable. He glanced toward the safe room where she waited, hoping she couldn't sense the weight of the danger surrounding her. With the enemy ships regrouping outside, time was running out. Laura called an emergency meeting with the senior crew members. To discuss their options, the mood in the room was somber, each person wrestling with the gravity of the situation. "We can't fight them head-on," Samantha Brooks said, shaking her head. "They outnumber us, and their weapons are superior. We'd be destroyed in minutes." Ryan chimed in, his voice hesitant but determined. "What if we broadcast the data? Expose their plans to the galaxy? If other species learn what they're doing, maybe they'll intervene." "It's risky," Laura admitted, "but it might be our only chance, if we can rally support. Even so distrust among their ranks, we might buy ourselves some time." Dr. Grant nodded in agreement. "And it gives us leverage. Once they know we have proof of their crimes, they'll think twice before attacking." Jake spoke up, his tone firm. "Then we do it. But we also need to prepare for the worst. If things go south, we protect Lyra at all costs." Laura met his gaze, seeing the resolve in his eyes. She knew he was right. Protecting Lyra wasn't just about compassionate, was about preserving hope. If they failed, the consequences would ripple across the stars. The plan moved forward quickly. Ryan worked tirelessly to decrypt and reformat the stolen data, making it accessible to anyone who intercepted the transmission. Meanwhile, Samantha plotted a course that would take them closer to neutral space, where they hoped to find Elizor, or at least refuge. As preparations continued, Jake visited Lyra in the safe room. She looked up as he entered, her large eyes filled with curiosity and concern. Though she couldn't fully understand what was happening, she sensed the tension in the air. "Hey, kid," Jake said softly, sitting beside her. He pulled out his harmonica and began to play a familiar tune, one he'd taught her earlier. The melody seemed to calm her, and she leaned against him, her small body trembling slightly. "I don't know how much you understand," Jake murmured, pausing the music, "but we're going to do everything we can to keep you safe. You hear me?" Lyra tilted her head, studying his face. Then slowly, she reached out and placed her hand over his, mimicking the gesture they had shared before. It was a simple act, but it carried profound meaning. Trust, connection, hope. Jake smiled despite the heaviness in his chest. "You're stronger than you think, Lyra. Don't forget that." When the time came to execute the plan, the crew gathered on the bridge, their nerves taut like wires. Laura stood at the helm, her voice steady as she addressed the enemy's ships through the comms. "This is Captain Laura Hayes of the USS Odyssey. Before you attack, I urge you to reconsider your actions. We possess evidence of your crimes that will not go unanswered." There was a long silence, followed by static. Then the guttural voice of the enemy commander crackled through the speakers. "Bluffing will not save you. Surrender the fugitive or face annihilation." Laura exchanged a glance with Ryan, who gave her a subtle nod. With a deep breath, she activated the broadcast. "Very well. Let the galaxy judge your intentions." It did. Stolen data streamed outward, transmitted across every available frequency. Details of the Empire's atrocities, their experiments, and their plans for conquest spread like wildfire through the void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, several of the enemy ships disengaged, breaking formation and retreating. Into the darkness. "They're falling back," Samantha exclaimed, relief washing over her face. But not all of them left. 2 ships remained, their weapons still trained on the Odyssey. Clearly, some factions within the Empire were unwilling to abandon their mission. "We bought ourselves some time," Laura said, her voice firm. "But we're not out of this yet. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The remaining ships launched a relentless assault, their attacks growing more aggressive. The Odyssey shuddered under the barrage, its shields dangerously close to failing. Sparks flew from overloaded systems, and alarms blared throughout the ship. In the chaos, Lyra emerged from the safe room, drawn by the noise. Jake spotted her. First, his heart skipping a beat. "Lyra, what are you doing here?" he shouted, rushing to grab her. Before he could reach her, another explosion rocked the ship, throwing him off balance. Lyra stumbled, her wide eyes filling with panic. She opened her mouth, emitting a high-pitched sound that resonated through the corridors. To everyone's astonishment, the enemy ships suddenly halted their attack, hovering motionless in space. "What just happened?" Samantha asked, staring at the view screen in disbelief. Dr. Grant stepped forward, her brow furrowed. "It's her. She's emitting a signal of frequency that disrupts their systems." Laura turned to Jake, who was holding Lyra protectively. "Can she do it again?" Jake hesitated, then nodded. "I think so. But it takes a lot out of her." Without hesitation, Laura made the call. "Do it. Whatever it takes, we end this." Now, with Jake's guidance, Lyra focused her energy, emitting the same piercing sound. This time, the effect was immediate. The enemy ship's engines sputtered, their weapons powering down. One by one they retreated, vanishing into the void. As the threat dissipated, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. Exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but they had done the impossible. They had protected Lyrand in doing so. They had struck a blow against tyranny. Laura approached Jake and Lyra, placing a hand on both of their shoulders. "You two saved us," she said simply. "Thank you." Lyra looked up at her, her expression softening. For the first time since arriving aboard the Odyssey, she seemed truly at peace. But the victory was bittersweet. They had exposed the Empire's secrets, but the battle was far from over. Somewhere out there, forces still sought to exploit Lyra's uniqueness for their own gain. And though they had won this round, the war for freedom and survival was only beginning. The USS Odyssey drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space, its crew battered but alive. The battle had ended, but the scars remained burn marks on the hull, flickering lights in the corridors, and the lingering tension of what they had just endured. Yet amidst the damage, there was a sense of triumph. They had faced an overwhelming enemy and emerged victorious not through brute force, but through courage, ingenuity, and unity. Lyra sat quietly in the medical bay, her small frame curled. Up on a makeshift bed, she looked exhausted, her luminous eyes dimmed by the effort it had taken to emit the frequency that disabled the enemy ships. Jake Miller stayed by her side, watching over her like a guardian. He knew she had pushed herself to her limits, and though he couldn't fully understand the strain she must have felt, he saw it in the way her tiny hands trembled and her breathing came in shallow gasps. Dr. Emily Grant monitored Lyra's vitals closely. ensuring her body wasn't suffering any long-term effects from the ordeal. "She'll recover, Emily," assured Jake, though her tone carried a hint of concern. "But we need to be careful. Whatever she did wasn't natural. Her abilities are tied to something far beyond our understanding." Jake nodded, his gaze fixed on Lyra. "She saved us all," he said softly. "If she hadn't stepped in—" He didn't finish the sentence. The thought of losing her, or worse, handing her over to those who would exploit her, was too much to bear. In the short time she had been aboard, Lyra had become more than just a passenger. She was family. Captain Laura Hayes stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. The immediate threat had passed, but questions lingered. What would happen next? The data they had broadcasted exposed the Empire's atrocities, but it also painted a target on their backs. Other factions might see them as heroes or as enemies to eliminate. Either way, the crew of the Odyssey couldn't afford to let their guard down. Ryan Carter approached her, holding a tablet with updated scans of nearby space. "We've detected a neutral zone about 2 days' travel from here," he reported. "It's unclaimed territory, but there are signs of activity. Could be traders, explorers, maybe even survivors from Lyra's people." Laura considered this, weighing the risks. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best option they had. "Set a course," she instructed. "If we can find allies or at least a safe haven, we'll take it." As the ship changed direction, Laura turned to Ryan. "And keep monitoring those frequencies. We don't know who else might have heard our transmission." In the mess hall, the crew gathered for a rare moment of rest. Morale was low after the battle, but laughter began to break through as Samantha Brooks recounted how one of the security officers had accidentally tripped over a loose wire during the boarding mission. Even Jake cracked a smile, though his thoughts kept drifting back to Lyra. "She's incredible," he said suddenly, drawing curious glances from the others. "I mean, think about it. She's been through so much, and yet she still found the strength to help us." Samantha nodded, her usual skepticism softened by recent events. "Yeah, well, I guess we underestimated her. All of us." Laura entered the room just then, her presence commanding attention. "Listen up," she said, her voice steady but warm. "What we did out there, it wasn't easy, but we did it together. And because of that, we gave Lyra a fighting chance. That's something to be proud of." Her words resonated deeply, lifting spirits. For the first time in days, hope began to replace fear. They were explorers, yes, but they were also protectors. If protecting Lyra meant standing against forces far greater than themselves, then so be it. 2 days later, the Odyssey arrived at the neutral zone. It was a barren expanse dotted with asteroids and debris, but nestled within it was a cluster of derelict ships and makeshift stations. Life thrived in unexpected places, and here, amidst the wreckage, was evidence of resilience. Traders bartered. Goods, scavengers sifted through scraps, and refugees sought shelter from the storms of war as the ship docked at one of the larger stations. Laura led a small team including Jake, Samantha, and Dr. Grant to investigate. They moved cautiously through the crowded corridors, their uniforms drawing curious stares. Many of the station's inhabitants recognized the Odyssey's insignia. News of their confrontation with the Empire had spread quickly at the heart of the station. They found a council chamber where representatives from various factions convened to discuss matters of mutual interest. Laura requested an audience, explaining their situation and presenting the stolen data as proof of the Empire's crimes. The room fell silent as holographic projections displayed images of devastation, experiments, and plans for conquest. When the presentation ended, a representative from a neighboring species, an elder, with wrinkled skin and piercing eyes, spoke first. "You have shown great bravery," he said, his voice gravelly but kind. "But you have also placed yourselves in grave danger. The Empire does not forgive betrayal." "We didn't do this for revenge," Laura replied firmly. "We did it to protect someone innocent, someone who deserves a chance to live without fear." The elder studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Perhaps there is hope yet. We will convene and decide how best to assist you. In the meantime, stay here. You are safe among us." Back aboard the Odyssey, the crew prepared to settle in temporarily. Lyra seemed to sense the change in atmosphere, her curiosity piqued by the unfamiliar surroundings. Jake took her to one of the observation decks, pointing out the strange shapes of the ships and stations outside. "See that?" said, gesturing to a particularly large vessel. "That's where some of the traders live. They trade food, tools, stories, all kinds of things." Lyra tilted her head, her eyes wide with wonder. Slowly, she raised her hand, mimicking the gesture Jake had taught her earlier. "Trade, stories." She asked haltingly, her pronunciation hesitant but clear. Jake grinned, ruffling her hair affectionately. "Yeah, kid, stories. Maybe someday you'll tell yours?" The days turned into weeks as negotiations continued. The council debated whether to intervene directly or offer covert support, knowing full well the risks involved. Meanwhile, the crew grew closer to Lyra, teaching her more words, sharing meals, and including her in their daily routines. She became a bridge between worlds, reminding everyone of the shared humanity, or rather, shared sentience that connected them all. One evening, as the stars twinkled outside the observation window, Lyra stood beside Jake, tracing constellations. With her finger, her movements were deliberate, almost practiced, as if she were remembering something from long ago. Then, softly, she began to hum a melody unlike anything Jake had heard before. It was hauntingly beautiful, filled with both sorrow and hope. "What is that?" he asked gently, not wanting to interrupt. Lyra paused, looking up at him. "Song of Home," she whispered. Jake felt a lump rise in his throat. He didn't press further, letting the moment speak for itself. Home, a concept so simple, yet so profound. For Lyra, it was a memory, a dream, a place she might never return to. But perhaps, just perhaps, she could find a new home among these strangers who had risked everything to save her. Eventually, the council reached a decision. They would mediate talks between the remnants of Lyra's people and the Empire, hoping to broker a fragile peace. It wouldn't be easy. Trust had been shattered. Wounds ran deep, but it was a start. A delegation agreed to escort Lyra to a secure location where survivors of her species awaited her arrival. On the day of departure, the crew gathered in the docking bay to say goodbye. Each member hugged Lyra tightly, their emotions raw but genuine. When it was Jake's turn, he knelt down to meet her eye level. "You're going to be okay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're strong, Lyra, stronger than anyone I've ever met." Lyra wrapped her arms around him, clinging to him like she had when they first met. Then, pulling back slightly, she placed a hand over her heart and then touched his chest, mimicking the gesture he had shown her countless times. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Jake smiled through his own tears, nodding. "Anytime, kid, anytime." As the shuttle carrying Lyra disappeared into the distance, the crew returned to the Odyssey, their hearts heavy but hopeful. They had done what they set out to do. They had protected her, given her a chance at a better future. And though their paths might never cross again, the bond they had formed would remain etched in their memories forever. Laura stood on the bridge, gazing at the stars once more. "Set a course for home," she ordered, her voice calm but resolute. "We've got a lot to report and a lot to reflect on." The engines roared to life, propelling the ship forward into the unknown. The journey ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, new discoveries, and new dangers. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet triumph. They had proven that even in the darkest corners of the universe, compassion could shine brightest. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness could change the course of history.